If you think silence is weakness, you don't understand the game yet. Those who disappear quietly are the ones becoming truly dangerous. Everyone else is talking, but victory belongs to those preparing in the shadows. This isn't a story about vanishing, it's a story about coming back unstoppable. Disappearing is not quitting, it is choosing focus over noise. Most people confuse constant visibility with progress, believing that if they are seen enough, something meaningful will happen. But movement is not the same as advancement, and noise is not the same as growth. Silence, when used intentionally, becomes a strategy. It creates space to think clearly, to see patterns, and to recognize what truly matters. When the noise fades, focus sharpens, and focus is the foundation of every significant transformation. In a world designed to distract, attention has become the most valuable currency. Notifications, opinions, comparisons, and expectations pull the mind in 100 directions at once. When you remain constantly available, constantly reacting, you surrender control of your future to whatever demands your attention next. Disappearing is the act of reclaiming that control. It is deciding that your direction matters more than your exposure and that your preparation is more important than public approval. Silence removes performance pressure. When there is no audience, there is no need to impress, explain, or defend your progress. You are no longer working for applause, you are working for results. This shift changes everything. Without the distraction of validation, effort becomes more honest and work becomes more intentional. You stop asking how it looks and start asking whether it works. That is where real improvement begins. Most breakthroughs are not loud moments, they are quiet decisions repeated consistently. Silence reveals discipline because there is nothing external forcing you to show up. When no one is watching, motivation disappears and only commitment remains. This is where many people fall off, not because they lack talent, but because they rely on external energy to sustain internal growth. Silence tests whether you are driven by purpose or by attention. In silence, you hear your own thinking more clearly. You begin to recognize habits that sabotage progress and beliefs that limit potential. Noise keeps these patterns hidden, but silence exposes them. It forces confrontation. And confrontation, though uncomfortable, is necessary for growth. You cannot correct what you refuse to acknowledge, and you cannot evolve while constantly drowning out your inner voice. Silence also reveals priorities. When distractions are removed, what remains becomes obvious. Time shows you where it has been wasted and where it should be invested. Energy becomes intentional instead of scattered. Instead of reacting to everything, you start responding only to what aligns with your direction. This selective focus creates momentum, not because you are doing more, but because you are doing what matters. There is power in being unreachable for a season. Not every message deserves a response. Not every opinion deserves consideration. Constant accessibility trains the world to interrupt your progress. Silence retrains it. It establishes boundaries that protect your focus and honor your goals. When you choose silence, you choose depth over breadth, mastery over multitasking, and long-term results over short-term recognition. Silence does not mean inactivity, it means concentrated effort. While others are busy announcing their intentions, you are building capabilities. While others are talking about change, you are restructuring your habits. Silence shifts energy from outward expression to inward development. This is where skills are sharpened, systems are refined, and standards are raised. The uncomfortable truth is that many people avoid silence because it removes their excuses. Without noise, there is no one to blame. Progress becomes personal responsibility. This is why silence feels heavy. It demands ownership. But ownership is the gateway to power. The moment you take full responsibility for your growth is the moment you begin to control the outcome. Silence also builds resilience. When progress is made without external encouragement, confidence becomes internal. You no longer depend on praise to continue or criticism to stop. Your drive becomes self-sustaining. This kind of strength cannot be shaken by trends, opinions, or setbacks because it was built in isolation, not borrowed from applause. Eventually, silence creates alignment. Your actions, values, and direction begin to match. Decisions become clearer because they are no longer influenced by external noise. You move with intention instead of impulse. This alignment multiplies effectiveness, turning effort into impact. Silence is not about hiding from the world. It is about preparing for it. It is the season where foundation is laid, structure is built, and strength is developed. Those who master silence understand that true power does not need constant visibility. It needs clarity, discipline, and direction. And when focus replaces noise, progress becomes inevitable. Most people chase attention before they have anything worth paying attention to. They believe visibility creates opportunity, but visibility without substance only magnifies weakness. Attention is not power, value is. When value is low, attention becomes a liability because it exposes gaps, inconsistency, and lack of mastery. This is why disappearing is necessary, not to avoid the world, but to increase what you bring back to it. The marketplace does not reward effort, it rewards usefulness. You can be busy all day and still be irrelevant if what you do does not solve a meaningful problem. Value is created when skill meets demand, when knowledge is refined into application, and when experience turns into results. This process requires time, focus, and repetition, none of which thrive under constant exposure. Growth needs privacy to mature. Attention too early creates pressure to perform before preparation is complete. It forces you to produce outcomes you have not yet earned. Instead of learning deeply, you rush to appear capable. Instead of building mastery, you settle for surface-level competence. Disappearing removes this pressure and replaces it with patience. It allows you to practice without judgment and improve without interruption. Value is not accidental. It is built deliberately through study, execution, reflection, and refinement. This cycle cannot be rushed. Every meaningful skill requires time to develop, and every powerful idea requires testing before it can be trusted. When you remove yourself from constant visibility, you gain the freedom to fail privately, adjust intelligently, and grow steadily. This is where confidence is formed, not from applause, but from proof. Many people misunderstand confidence. They think it comes from positive thinking or external validation. Real confidence comes from competence. It is the natural byproduct of knowing you can deliver because you have done the work. Disappearing gives you the space to build this competence without distraction. When you return, you don't need to convince anyone, you demonstrate. The problem with chasing attention is that it often leads to imitation instead of innovation. When you are constantly visible, you are constantly comparing. Comparison weakens originality and dilutes focus. In isolation, creativity expands. You stop reacting to what others are doing and start responding to what the market actually needs. This is where differentiation is born. Value increases when problems get solved at a higher level. That level is reached through depth, not speed. Disappearing allows you to go deeper, to understand systems, principles, and patterns rather than just tactics. Tactics change, principles endure. When you build on principles, your value compounds instead of depreciating. Another advantage of building value in silence is leverage. Skills developed privately can be applied repeatedly and scaled over time. Attention-based success often requires constant effort to maintain visibility, but value-based success creates momentum. Once value is established, demand grows naturally. People seek out solutions that work. They don't need to be convinced endlessly. The world is filled with people who are loud but ineffective. They talk often but deliver rarely. Over time, attention stops responding to noise. What remains is respect for results. When you choose to disappear and build value, you position yourself on the side of results. You trade momentary recognition for lasting relevance. Disappearing also shifts your mindset from approval, seeking to contribution focused. Instead of asking, how do I get noticed? You ask, how do I become useful? This question changes behavior. It drives learning, experimentation, and improvement. It forces you to measure progress by impact rather than likes, views, or opinions. Value attracts attention naturally, but attention rarely creates value. This is the order most people get wrong. When you reverse it, When you build first and showcase later, you remove desperation from your actions. You speak with certainty because you have substance behind your words. You move with patience because you are not dependent on immediate feedback. There is a season to be seen and a season to be built. Those who understand this timing gain an advantage. They emerge with clarity, capability, and confidence. They don't chase opportunities. Opportunities recognize them. They don't explain their worth. Their work defines it. When value is established, attention becomes an amplifier instead of a crutch. It magnifies strength instead of exposing weakness. This is the reward of disappearing with intention. You return not asking for permission, but offering solutions. And in a world full of noise, solutions always stand out. Transformation does not happen in public view. It happens when external influence is removed and internal truth is confronted. Isolation is not punishment, it is a refining process. When you step away from constant interaction, comparison, and noise, you are left with yourself, your habits, your thinking, your discipline, and your standards. This is where identity is forged, not imagined. Without an audience to perform for, you are forced to face who you really are and who you are willing to become. Most people attempt to change outcomes without changing identity. They want better results but maintain the same patterns, the same reactions, and the same self-image. Isolation exposes this disconnect. When there is no one to impress, excuses lose their power. You can no longer blame circumstances, people, or timing. Progress becomes personal responsibility. This is uncomfortable, but discomfort is the signal that growth has begun. Identity is shaped by repeated behavior, not by declarations. Saying you are disciplined means nothing if your actions contradict it. In isolation, behavior becomes honest. There is no social pressure to pretend. You either do the work or you don't. This clarity is essential because consistency is born from identity alignment. You don't rise to new standards by forcing habits. You rise by becoming the kind of person who naturally keeps them. Isolation also reveals what you value most. When distractions are removed, priorities surface. You begin to notice where your time goes, what drains your energy, and what strengthens your focus. This awareness allows you to redesign your environment and routines intentionally. Identity evolves when daily actions reflect long-term vision instead of short-term comfort. One of the greatest benefits of isolation is freedom from comparison. Constant exposure to others' progress distorts self-perception. You either feel behind or falsely superior, neither of which produces growth. In isolation, the only comparison is between who you were and who you are becoming. This internal benchmark is more accurate and more productive. Progress becomes measurable, not emotional. Isolation also strengthens decision-making. Without constant opinions influencing your choices, you learn to trust your judgment. You stop seeking approval and start seeking alignment. Decisions are made based on principles instead of popularity. This builds internal authority, the confidence that comes from knowing why you do what you do. Internal authority cannot be shaken by trends or criticism because it is rooted in clarity. Many people fear isolation because it removes external validation. Praise is addictive, and without it, insecurity surfaces. But this is precisely why isolation is necessary. Validation borrowed from others is fragile. Validation built from self-respect is durable. When you keep promises to yourself consistently, trust is formed. That trust becomes confidence, and confidence reshapes identity. Isolation is also where discipline becomes non-negotiable. Motivation fades quickly when there is no external encouragement. What remains is structure. You either create routines that support your growth or you drift. This phase teaches you that discipline is not about intensity, it is about consistency. Small actions repeated daily redefine who you are. Identity shifts when your standards rise. Standards are not what you say you want, they are what you tolerate. In isolation, tolerance is exposed. You see clearly where you compromise, procrastinate, or settle. This awareness gives you the power to change. Each decision to raise a standard, no matter how small, reinforces a new identity. Isolation also builds emotional resilience. When you learn to work without recognition, you develop independence from external feedback. Success no longer inflates you, and failure no longer defines you. Your stability comes from within. This emotional maturity is a hallmark of high-level performers. They are not controlled by moods or opinions. They are anchored in purpose. Over time, isolation creates congruence. Thoughts, actions, and goals begin to align. You are no longer pulled in conflicting directions because your identity has been clarified. This alignment increases efficiency. Energy wasted on doubt and indecision is redirected toward execution. Progress accelerates not because you work harder, but because you work cleaner. When you eventually return from isolation, the change is evident, not because you announce it, but because it shows in how you speak, how you decide, and how you carry responsibility. The world meets the person you built when no one was watching. Identity forged in isolation does not seek attention. It commands respect through consistency, clarity, and quiet confidence. Most people rely on motivation to move forward, but motivation is unstable. It rises with excitement and disappears with resistance. Systems, on the other hand, function regardless of emotion. They turn intention into structure and effort into consistency. When you disappear from noise and distraction, you gain the space to build systems that operate even on days when you don't feel inspired. This is how momentum becomes unstoppable, not through bursts of energy, but through repeatable processes. A system is simply a set of actions designed to produce a specific outcome. The power of systems lies in their predictability. When actions are clear and scheduled, progress no longer depends on willpower. Willpower is limited, but systems conserve energy by reducing decision-making. Instead of asking what to do each day, you follow what has already been decided. This shift alone increases execution dramatically. Disappearing allows you to observe your behavior honestly. You begin to see patterns. When you work best, where you procrastinate, and what triggers inconsistency. These insights are critical because effective systems are personalized, not generic. What works for others may not work for you. Isolation gives you the clarity to design routines that align with your strengths instead of fighting them. Consistency beats intensity because intensity is exhausting. Many people start strong and fade quickly because their approach is unsustainable. Systems favor small, manageable actions repeated daily. These actions compound over time, creating progress that feels slow at first but becomes powerful with persistence. Momentum is not created by doing more. It is created by doing the right things regularly. Systems also protect focus. When tasks are predefined, distractions lose their influence. You don't negotiate with comfort or impulse because your structure is already in place. This reduces mental fatigue and increases output. Focus becomes a habit rather than a struggle. Over time, this habit transforms productivity into identity. You become someone who executes reliably. Another benefit of systems is measurement. What gets measured gets improved. Disappearing provides the opportunity to track performance without external pressure. You can assess what is working, what is not, and where adjustments are needed. This feedback loop turns effort into learning. Instead of guessing, you improve intentionally. Systems shift the relationship with failure. Failure is no longer personal, it becomes data. When a system doesn't produce the desired outcome, you refine it instead of quitting. This mindset encourages experimentation and resilience. Progress becomes inevitable because each setback strengthens the process rather than stopping it. Many people underestimate the compounding effect of systems. Small improvements made consistently lead to exponential results over time. The problem is that compounding is invisible in the early stages. Without patience, people abandon the process before it pays off. Disappearing removes the need for immediate results and allows compounding to work uninterrupted. Systems also create leverage. Once established, they require less effort to maintain while producing greater output. This frees mental and physical energy for higher level thinking and creativity. Instead of constantly managing chaos, you operate within order. Order multiplies effectiveness because it reduces friction. Disappearing is essential because building systems requires uninterrupted focus. Noise interrupts rhythm, and rhythm is what systems depend on. When you step away from constant demands, you can design, test, and refine routines without interference. This private development is what makes public performance appear effortless. Systems transform discipline from force into flow. When actions are automated through routine, discipline becomes natural. You no longer rely on motivation to start, the system carries you forward. This is the point where momentum becomes self-sustaining. Over time, systems reshape identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. This identity shift reinforces consistency, creating a cycle of execution and confidence. Confidence grows because results are repeatable, not accidental. When you return from this period of focused system building, your progress looks sudden to others. They see outcomes without witnessing the structure behind them. What appears unstoppable is simply the result of systems working quietly over time. Momentum was not created in public moments, it was engineered in private routines. Growth always demands distance. Elevation requires separation from environments, habits, and relationships that reinforce comfort over progress. This separation is often misunderstood as arrogance or avoidance, but in reality it is discipline. You cannot rise while remaining anchored to everything that keeps you where you are. Disappearing for a season is not rejection of people, it is protection of purpose. Every environment has a ceiling. Some environments reward average effort and punish ambition. In those spaces, growth feels threatening because it disrupts the norm. When you begin to elevate, resistance appears, not always in obvious opposition, but in subtle distractions, doubts, and expectations to remain familiar. Separation becomes necessary because constant exposure to limiting environments slowly erodes focus and resolve. Comfort is the most expensive addiction. It offers temporary relief at the cost of long-term potential. Familiar routines, predictable conversations, and low expectations feel safe, but safety often disguises stagnation. Separation removes the safety net and replaces it with challenge. Challenge, though uncomfortable, is the catalyst for development. You cannot grow muscles without resistance, and you cannot grow capacity without pressure. Disappearing allows you to redesign your inputs. What you consume mentally and emotionally shapes what you produce. When you step away from negative influences, constant opinions, and unproductive habits, your thinking changes. Clarity increases because your mind is no longer cluttered. With fewer inputs, you gain greater control over direction. Not everyone can go where you are going, and not everyone needs access to your process. Some relationships are seasonal. They serve a purpose at one stage and become restrictive at another. Recognizing this is not betrayal, it is awareness. Separation is an act of maturity, the understanding that growth sometimes requires solitude. Separation also reveals who you are without reinforcement. When familiar validation disappears, you discover whether your drive is internal or borrowed. This is a crucial test. External encouragement can carry you only so far. Sustainable progress requires self-motivation. Disappearing forces you to generate your own momentum, strengthening independence and resilience. One of the hardest parts of separation is being misunderstood. When you withdraw, people may assume disinterest or superiority. The temptation is to explain, justify, or seek approval. But explanation drains energy that could be invested in growth. True elevation does not require consensus. It requires commitment. Separation sharpens focus by reducing noise. When fewer voices influence decisions, clarity emerges. You stop reacting and start responding intentionally. This intentionality leads to better choices because they are aligned with long-term vision rather than short-term comfort. Focus becomes deeper because it is undisturbed. Isolation at higher levels is not loneliness, it is alignment. As standards rise, options narrow. The margin for distraction decreases because the cost of deviation increases. Separation is the price paid for precision. The higher the level, the fewer the allowances. Disappearing also changes how you value time. Time becomes intentional instead of available. You guard it carefully because you understand its role in building capacity. This respect for time accelerates growth because it eliminates waste. Every action is evaluated based on alignment, not convenience. Separation strengthens emotional discipline. Without constant social interaction, emotions stabilize. You learn to process internally instead of externally. This emotional maturity increases self-control and reduces reactivity. Stability becomes a competitive advantage. Over time, separation produces clarity of identity. You stop defining yourself by association and start defining yourself by standards. Standards dictate behavior, and behavior shapes results. This clarity creates confidence that does not depend on approval or agreement. When you eventually re-enter the world with elevated capacity, the difference is evident. Your presence is grounded, your decisions are firm, and your direction is clear. The separation that once felt uncomfortable becomes the reason for your growth. Elevation always requires distance, and those willing to pay that price discover levels unreachable by those who refuse to separate. Growth always demands distance. Elevation requires separation from environments, habits, and relationships that reinforce comfort over progress. This separation is often misunderstood as arrogance or avoidance, but in reality, it is discipline. You cannot rise while remaining anchored to everything that keeps you where you are. Disappearing for a season is not rejection of people, it is protection of purpose. Every environment has a ceiling. Some environments reward average effort and quietly punish ambition. In those spaces, growth feels disruptive because it challenges the unspoken agreement to stay the same. When you begin to elevate, resistance shows up not always as confrontation, but as distraction, doubt, and subtle pressure to remain familiar. Separation becomes necessary because constant exposure to limiting environments gradually weakens focus and resolve. Comfort is one of the most expensive addictions. It offers short-term relief while quietly stealing long-term potential. Familiar routines, predictable conversations, and low expectations feel safe, but safety often disguises stagnation. Separation removes this comfort and replaces it with challenge. Challenge forces adaptation, and adaptation is where growth occurs. Capacity only expands when it is stretched. Disappearing creates space to redesign your inputs. What you consistently consume mentally and emotionally determines what you eventually produce. When negative influence, unnecessary opinions, and unproductive habits are removed, thinking becomes clearer. With fewer external inputs, your internal voice becomes stronger. Direction replaces confusion, and intentionality replaces reaction. Not everyone can go where you are going, and not everyone needs access to your process. Some connections are seasonal, serving a purpose at one stage, but becoming restrictive at another. Recognizing this is not disloyalty, it is awareness. Separation is a sign of maturity, the understanding that growth sometimes requires solitude. Advancement does not happen by consensus. Separation also reveals whether your drive is internal or borrowed. When familiar encouragement disappears, motivation is tested. External validation can sustain effort temporarily, but it cannot support long-term elevation. Disappearing forces you to generate momentum internally. This process strengthens resilience and builds independence, qualities required at higher levels. One of the hardest costs of separation is being misunderstood. When you withdraw, assumptions are made. The temptation is to explain your absence or justify your focus, but explanation drains energy that should be invested in development. Those who are committed to growth accept misunderstanding as part of the process. Progress does not require permission. Distance sharpens focus by reducing noise. Fewer voices mean fewer conflicts in decision making. You stop reacting to expectations and start responding to purpose. This clarity leads to better choices because decisions are aligned with long-term vision instead of short-term comfort. Focus deepens when it is protected. As standards rise, tolerance decreases. At higher levels, there is less margin for distraction because the cost of deviation is greater. Separation is not isolation for its own sake, it is alignment. The higher the level of precision required, the fewer allowances can be made. Excellence demands boundaries. Disappearing changes your relationship with time. Time becomes intentional rather than available. You no longer give it away casually because you understand its role in building capacity. Respect for time accelerates progress by eliminating waste. Every commitment is evaluated by alignment, not convenience. Separation also strengthens emotional discipline. Reduced social stimulation stabilizes emotions. Instead of processing externally, you process internally. This builds self-control and reduces reactivity. Emotional stability becomes an advantage because it allows consistent execution regardless of mood or circumstance. Over time, separation clarifies identity. You stop defining yourself by association and start defining yourself by standards. Standards shape behavior, and behavior determines outcomes. This clarity produces confidence that does not rely on approval or agreement. The separation that once felt uncomfortable becomes the foundation for elevation. A real return does not require an announcement. When preparation has been done properly, results speak with authority. Most people feel the need to explain themselves because their outcomes are still uncertain. But when work has been refined in private, explanation becomes unnecessary. The difference between noise and impact is evidence. Evidence does not ask for attention, it commands it. When you disappear with intention, you remove yourself from the cycle of constant reaction. You stop performing for opinions and start producing outcomes. This shift changes how you carry yourself. Confidence becomes calm instead of loud. You are no longer driven by urgency to be seen because you are anchored in certainty. That certainty comes from knowing what you can deliver, not hoping to be believed. Results change the way conversations happen. Instead of convincing, you demonstrate. Instead of persuading, you attract. People listen differently when they can see proof. Proof creates gravity. It pulls opportunities toward you without effort. This is the power of returning with substance rather than stories. Many people try to re-enter too early. They come back while still unfinished, still uncertain, still dependent on validation. True return happens only when internal standards are met, not when impatience demands recognition. Timing matters. Returning before readiness weakens credibility, while waiting until results are clear strengthens influence. Results also remove negotiation. When value is visible, there is less resistance. You are no longer competing on promises, you are operating from performance. Performance simplifies decision-making for others. They don't have to guess, they can see. This clarity elevates your position naturally. Another advantage of letting results speak is emotional freedom. When outcomes validate effort, you are no longer affected by doubt or comparison. You stop monitoring reactions and start focusing on impact. This freedom allows you to operate with composure. Composure is often mistaken for arrogance, but it is simply confidence without insecurity. Results also redefine identity. You no longer identify with potential, you identify with execution. This shift changes behavior. You move differently because you know the standard you must maintain. Excellence becomes normal, not exceptional. Consistency replaces hype. Returning with results changes the type of opportunities that appear. You stop attracting attention seekers and start attracting decision makers. People who value substance recognize substance. This alignment reduces friction and increases effectiveness. Collaboration becomes easier because credibility is already established. There is also a responsibility that comes with results. When your work speaks, expectations rise. This is not pressure, it is trust. Trust is earned through consistency. Returning with results means you are prepared to carry weight, not just attention. Influence requires capacity. Results silence criticism. Opinions lose relevance when performance is measurable. Critics often rely on uncertainty to gain influence. When uncertainty disappears, so does their power. This does not mean you become immune to feedback, but it means feedback is evaluated, not absorbed emotionally. Returning without explanation also preserves dignity. You don't owe everyone access to your process. Privacy during development protects focus and integrity. When you return, you bring finished work, not fragments. This distinction separates professionals from amateurs. Results also accelerate momentum. success builds on itself. Each outcome strengthens belief and sharpens execution. Momentum becomes a force that carries you forward, not something you have to create repeatedly. This is why a strong return often looks sudden. It is the visible effect of long, invisible effort. When preparation meets opportunity, impact is inevitable. You don't need to chase attention because attention follows performance. You don't need to announce growth because growth is evident. You don't need to justify absence because presence now carries weight. A return built on results changes how you see the world. You move with patience because you understand process. You speak with clarity because you understand value. You act with confidence because you understand capacity. This understanding cannot be faked or rushed. Coming back unstoppable is not about proving something to others. It is about meeting a standard you set for yourself in silence. When that standard is met, your return becomes natural, powerful, and undeniable. You didn't disappear to be forgotten. You disappeared to level up. You don't need to announce yourself. Your results will speak for you. Those who laughed at your silence will now be silenced by your achievements. And when you return, you won't just come back, you'll come back unstoppable.